I want to talk a little about the story of Chanukah, the actual story of Chanukah, which many people don't know too much about. It's very funny by divine providence. It's one of these holidays that the most secular Jews will even commemorate, and they'll light a menorah, and they're very happy and they're very proud. In the diaspora, it falls in Kislev, the end of Kislev always, which generally is in December, sometimes late December, and it falls by Nittelnach, by the non-Jewish holiday also. So, as a way of assimilation, Jews have sometimes brought it together with this other holiday, and there's like season parties, and there's like all these things. And the interesting thing to note is that nothing could be further from the truth in terms of connecting these 2 days. The actual story of Hanukkah, as explained by Rav Soloveitchik, Zecher Tzadok Livracha, is nothing short of a civil war within the Jewish people. It's basically was a time when there were Greek Hellenists and they were taking over the land of Israel, and they had sieged. They were in Jerusalem. They wanted to make public displays of how they were going to erase God's Torah from the earth. And they had one story that the man Rabbi Eliezer, who was 9 years old at the time, he was a righteous person his whole life. They told him, eat pork in public, so other people are going to also eat pork in public. And he refused, so they put him to death at 9 years old. Hannah and her 7 sons, a famous story, that also happens during this time. And there are many Jews actually that went along with this movement, and this has been something that's been with the Jewish people since inception. When they left Egypt, when they were by Har Sinai, so there was an Erev Rav. Some people say it was actually Jews, and everyone but Shevet Levi gathered around and basically commenced 49 days after leaving Egypt, idol worship. But by Har Sinai, 40 days after, 39 days after. So 50 plus whatever it is, over a little over 100 days, they commenced with idol worship, and it's been going on. The sect within the Jewish people has always been with us, and the reason is because the entirety of the Torah is not a simple thing to understand, and it's not a simple thing to take upon yourself, and through us being in exile for so long, the Jew has kind of been able to psychologically convince himself that he has a choice in this relationship. But one thing that the Jew is becoming more and more aware of is that there's no choice on the side of the Jew or on the side of God. God made an eternal decree, an eternal command, that I am the God who took you out of Egypt, and you should have no other gods. And He gave us, through our sages and in the time of the Torah, in the time of the desert, transmitted to us laws by which to live our lives. And it's very challenging. And God, Rabbi Jacobson, Jacobson has a nice line. He says, the Torah isn't about holy people doing holy things. It's about regular people trying to aspire to do holy things. It's a nice thought that basically sums up the experience of the Jew, is that God, He gives us a book of perfection, of human perfection. And thank God we have books like the Tanya and L'Kadem Aran. We have different explanations as to how to achieve these goals. But basically, He doesn't expect us to be perfect. If He wanted perfect entities, He can create angels. He has billions, scores and scores of angels, scores upon scores. So the Jew isn't supposed to be an angel. The Jew is supposed to be this tragic figure that struggles in his relationship with God and seeks perfection always, knowing that it's unattainable. And the story of Hanukkah is basically the story that there was, they did away with the real high priest, Yochanan, and they put in this other guy who went by his Greek name Jason, and they tried to make like a whole charade out of the temple service. And it was a very tragic thing, and many Jews went along with it, and their rationale to their brothers was, look, this has been such a thorn in our side, we keep saying we're different, we keep saying we're special and we're chosen, and it's not working. We're just getting hated for it. If there is a God on our side, where is He? And let's just forget about it, and let's be like them, and eventually we'll forget anything about ourselves, and we'll go back to just being one of the regular nations of the world, and God will forget that He took us out of Egypt, and God will forget all these things, kiviyachol, like we say, as if it's possible. But you can't erase God's memory, and you can't erase man's memory. The story of the Torah is 3,320 years old, and it's been told in every single generation, handed down from generation to generation, how we left Egypt and what God demands of us. And we tell it every year at Passover, and we know it's true because it comes from our ancestors. It's not, the one thing that separates really Judaism from the other two major monotheistic religions is that Judaism was a revelation to an entire people, about 3 million, according to one opinion. And with the other religions, where it's a revelation to one man. So any man could come and say, God revealed Himself to me, and this is what He said, and this is what He says, and this is what He says. It's not a big deal. But God took the entire nation of Jews, which are actually, according to Medrash, much greater before the plague of darkness. And he brought them into this desert, into the mountain of Sinai, and he gave them, he revealed himself to the entire nation. So I just always wonder, what if the average secular Jew knew what this holiday was about? Would he really celebrate with so much zest? And you get a sense that they're really celebrating, at least Chutz La'aretz, outside of Eretz Yisrael. They're celebrating just to have something to celebrate during this time of year, because it's such a strong time of, the birth of the one from Nazareth, or whatever it is that they commemorate. But it's just an interesting thing. We don't have a choice as God's people. We don't have an option. We don't have a, and it's not that you're expected to do everything all at once on the same day. God knows, for many of us are born into families, the vast majority, I think 90% of the Jews are considered non-religious at this point. God knows we're born into these families that lack education. And He doesn't expect us to turn over our lives in one day. But He does demand little small things of us, one thing at a time. Give a little charity, put on phylacteries, try to keep a Sabbath with a friend of yours, or try to make small changes in your life. Because God's not going anywhere, and the world's not going anywhere. The saddest thing of this whole time of the exile, in my opinion, is that the Jews had the potential to make it much less severe, and so do the nations of the world. Today's in the Chumash Rashi, it says my favorite thing, that it's the Esav meets Yaakov and they hug, and when they hug, basically the Rav Shimon Bar Yochai says it's a known halacha that Esav hates Yaakov. The nations of the world, because God picked a favorite son in the Jewish people, they're going to hate us. But it doesn't mean that they're not going to be moved when the time comes and we all realize as a planet, we were so close to living in our own little version of the Garden of Eden. We were so close to having world peace and abundance. If only the Jews would have done what they were supposed to do, and only the non-Jews would have befriended the Jews and inspired them and encouraged them to be separate, to be distinct, to be individual. It used to be, when communism came around, and also in general, because governments like to keep certain types of status quo. So they used to promulgate this thought that to be the same is good, to be normal is okay. And it wasn't really until a little later on that things like individuality became hip and became okay to talk about. And wow, you're different. That's so great. I'm so glad you can express your difference. I'm so glad you can be different, and you can talk different, and you have different customs. When this came about, this was an amazing thing for the Jewish person. Because basically it was a sign that it's okay not to be the same as everyone else. And it's okay that God chose you. And it's okay that you're doing things now which were commanded to you from Mount Sinai, given over from generation to generation. And the situations we see in the world today, every Chanukah, every day resonates with truth. If the Jews would simply repent and return to God wholeheartedly, there wouldn't be these issues. And if the non-Jews would encourage them in this path, the non-Jews would see the Jews for what they are, for they're God's royalty. It says, I'll make you a nation of priests. God has such a love for the Jewish people. If the non-Jew would just open their eyes and see that this is how God views the Jews, and how come they're not doing the same thing. If we work together as opposed to working against each other, we would have such a beautiful planet. We'd have such a beautiful reality. We'd be able to love waking up every day. We'd be able to love each other, love our neighbors, and love our planet. So that's the story of Hanukkah. There was a civil war between the religious people saying, we're going to get back this temple service, and the non-religious people saying, let's just forget about it. Let's just